It occurs to me that we are a culture of fear. We don't seem to realize it. As has been well documented by now, the recent mass school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14, 2012, ratcheted up the vehemence of both pro and anti-gun rhetoric. Both extremes of these sides are filled with an incredible fear. A typical pro-gun response to this statement would go something like this: "I'm not afraid of anything. You think I'm afraid? You just try me, mister, and me and my gun will show you who's afraid." Of course, there's fear on the other side, too, and I think most folks on that side at least recognize it, but they don't realize that it distorts their thinking. They get hysterical and irrational in the way they present their positions. Disarming the entire country house by house isn't going to happen. Guns aren't going away. Not only aren't they going away, they shouldn't go away. People hunt. People still live far enough out in the country that natural predators are a problem. Guns may not be the problem, you see. The problem may be us, our fear. Our relationships are plagued with insecurity and jealousy. We're afraid of losing our relationships. We're afraid of being rejected or hurt. We're afraid of being alone. We raise our kids to be afraid. Instead of teaching them to pay attention and look after themselves, we wrap them in plastic and padding. We teach them to fear everyone they don't know, and then wonder why they end up socially awkward and insecure. We're afraid for them and for ourselves. So we seek out information about more things to be afraid of. We fill ourselves with them. That single man in the grocery store is just there to oogle your kids. That young black kid in the hoodie, he's not just walking back from the store, he's casing your house. Somewhere in your neighborhood right now, there's someone planning a home invasion. Your home. Go buy a gun. Go buy 10 guns. And an alarm system. And a bunch of locks. I've got a right to defend myself. Never mind that if it weren't for all the other people defending themselves, I wouldn't have to worry about it. And if I wasn't so busy defending myself, you wouldn't have to worry about it. We're so afraid of what we don't understand, and we're even more afraid of what we do understand. We don't talk about mental illness as something for which there is sympathy, or, heaven forbid, empathy, even though we all know that we're all a little nuts sometimes, because we're afraid that being a little nuts means we might be a lot nuts. And if we can empathize with someone who's nuts, then maybe we're nuts too, and we're afraid of that. And we're afraid of being told what to do, and we're afraid of doing the hard work of understanding each other, and we're afraid of doing the hard work of admitting to our kids that maybe we're wrong. And we're afraid to allow them to learn their own lessons and find their own paths, because that means they're growing up, and that means we're growing old, and that means death is ever closer, and we're all afraid of that. It's a big cycle of fear masquerading as bravado, and a lot of it, believe it or not, goes back to 9/11. The day we lost our collective innocence, the day we realized that we were not invulnerable, that John Wayne was not going to come riding over the hills with the cavalry just before the evil bad guys succeeded in their plot, that waving a flag doesn't always help, and that no matter how much red, white, and blue we bleed, we're still bleeding. And power uses that fear to control us through legislation and also through commerce. We'll be sorting out the Patriot Act for the next 3 generations, if we manage to survive that long, in between stocking up on guns and ammo every time some nut job goes off. You know, it's funny how quickly people will jump to assume that the government is taking advantage of these tragedies, or, if you're really out of your tree, creating them. But the people who make those kinds of accusations never stop to ask who is actually profiting from not only these tragedies, but the very accusations they're repeating without ever realizing that they've been programmed to do it. We just love to talk about our freedom and our rights, and boy, that big bad government sure isn't going to take away my right to defend myself. Did you notice the fear in that last statement? But we never ask how free we really are if we feel like we have to be armed to the teeth all the time just to stay safe. We aren't free. In a million ways we aren't free. Some of those ways even make sense, but many of them don't. Most of them are a direct result of fear.
Fear.
Of the unknown.
Fear.
Of growing older.
Fear.
Of finding out we're not perfect.
Fear.
Of finding out we're wrong about something.
Fear.
Of someone thinking poorly of us.
Fear.
Of brown people.
Fear.
Of other religions.
Fear.
Of admitting that our country is not perfect and we can still learn from other cultures and nations.
Fear.
Of a black kid walking home from the gas station.
Fear.
Of some nutjob getting hold of the guns his mom bought to quote-unquote protect herself and turning them on a school, and so let's go buy more guns. Maybe if we buy enough, the next time, the nutjob can bring a friend, or shoot a second school, or a few cops, with our guns, that we bought to protect ourselves. Or maybe even his or her own guns, that we ensured he or she could buy, for his or her own self-protection.
Fear.
Of having to pay taxes so we can ensure everyone here in the richest nation on earth has health care and food.
Fear.
Of admitting that material wealth is not a measure of character.
Fear.
Of realizing we've been wrong about important things all our lives.
Fear.
Of admitting that, but for the simple luck of the draw, all those homeless people and addicts and everyone else we look down on could just as easily be us. We don't want to enact common sense limitation on gun ownership because we're afraid we might not pass the psych eval. We don't want to leave our guns at home because we might meet a threat on the street. But we never realize that, to someone else, we are the threat on the street. We're too busy being afraid to notice that, and so are the people we're afraid of. We are turning this nation into one gigantic, fear-propelled, circular firing squad. Isn't it about time we stopped being afraid? The worst that can happen is that we die, and we're all going to die sooner or later anyway. Isn't it about time we started caring more about our right to walk around without feeling like we need to protect ourselves all the time than about the right to protect ourselves? Isn't it about time that we acknowledge the simple reality that the very consequences of so much self-protection are, in the long run, precisely what we're protecting ourselves against? Isn't it about time we end the cycle of fear? Isn't it about time we stop letting the terrorists win? Because they're winning, you know. Our fear, our constant abject fear of everything, is evidence of that. Isn't it about time we stood up for ourselves in a real, meaningful way by refusing to allow our lives, our communities, and our nation to be controlled first and foremost by fear? I think it is.
This is a day of national consecration, and I am certain that on this day my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.